Okay, let's unpack this a bit.
Okay.
You know how sometimes you just feel more like a morning person, or maybe a night owl?
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, there's this really intriguing idea, almost poetic, from Zoran the dragon calling math the silent language of the cosmos, hinting at these like underlying
And
rhythms.
those big cosmic patterns,
Yeah.
they actually echo right inside us in our daily energy, our bodies. It's fascinating.
It really is. And that's what we're doing today, a deep dive specifically for you, Soul Traveler, into your natural energy flow, trying to understand how it shapes your well-being.
Exactly. We're looking at the circadian chart results you provided, Soul Traveler. The goal is to explore what they suggest about your internal clock.
Think of it like getting a personalized map to your energy highs and lows through the day.
Now, we do need to be clear about expectations here. What we're discussing is based on the birth info we have.
Right.
So we can't give, a minute-by-minute breakdown without much more detailed physiological data like heart rate tracking and things like that.
Sure, that makes sense.
But we can definitely get a valuable, generalized picture of your likely patterns and tendencies.
Okay. And I noticed in the info you sent, there was also some mention of numerology.
Yes, that's right. We'll touch on it very briefly, and this is really important, numerological interpretations aren't based on, well, scientific evidence. They're quite subjective.
Gotcha. So purely speculative on that front. Our main focus is the science bit, the circadian rhythms.
Precisely. So with that framework, let's dive into what we can infer about your potential chronotype, Soul Traveler.
Okay, where do we start?
Well, the birth time provided, 7:06 a.m., it generally points towards what we'd call a moderately early chronotype.
Moderately early, so like a morning lark type,
Right.
or leaning that way?
Yeah, something like a morning lark or maybe a moderate early bird.
Hmm.
It suggests a natural tendency to, get going a bit earlier in the day.
Okay, so if someone generally leans towards being a morning type,
Hmm.
what does that usually mean for their energy across the day? How does it typically flow?
This is where it gets interesting. For folks with this kind of tendency, energy often starts building up in the late morning.
Okay.
Continues rising into the early afternoon, that peak alertness, peak focus time. It's likely going to land somewhere between, say, 10 a.m. and 2 p.m.
10 a.m. to 2 p.m., that's quite a specific window.
It's a general peak zone, yeah. And interestingly, this pattern often aligns better with typical 9-to-5 work schedules. So potentially less of that social jet lag you hear about.
Right, that feeling of being out of sync on weekends. So after that 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. peak, is that when the classic afternoon slump might hit for this type?
It often is, yes. Following that peak, there's usually a gradual decline in energy through the late afternoon and into the evening.
Okay. And if that 10 to 2 window is likely the peak mental performance time?
Then that's generally the prime time to tackle those really demanding tasks,
Right.
the ones that need serious brain power and concentration. Aligning tasks with energy is key.
Makes sense. Work with the energy, not against it. So what about the other end? Winding down. When does the body typically signal it's time for rest?
For this potential morning-leaning profile, those natural cues to start winding down, preparing for rest and recovery, they usually begin in the early evening, maybe around 7 or 8 p.m.
Okay.
And that recovery phase continues through the night until morning.
Right. So let's zoom out a bit. We've got this potential daily flow. What does this suggest for like ideal sleep and wake times generally?
Building on that potential chronotype, yeah, the generalized sweet spot for waking up would likely be somewhere between 6 a.m. and 7 a.m.
6 or 7 a.m. wake up?
And then a corresponding bedtime falling around maybe 10 p.m. to 11 p.m.
Okay. But these are general guidelines, right? Not set in stone.
Absolutely. Just general tendencies based on the chronotype leaning.
Mhm.
Individual sleep needs definitely vary, but it's a good starting point.
And the sleep-wake cycle, how does it connect back to those energy ups and downs during the day? Is it just energy up when awake, down when asleep?
It's more nuanced than that, but they're tightly linked. So as we said, energy ramps up gradually after waking,
Right.
hits that peak around midday, then you see the decline in the late afternoon and more significant drop in the evening, signaling the body to prepare for sleep.
Okay. The report also mentioned metabolic rate synchronization. What's that about, in simple terms?
Yeah, that's another fascinating link. Our metabolism, how we process energy from food, often mirrors our overall energy levels.
Huh.
So the idea is that it might be beneficial to sync up your meals with your energy demands, maybe larger meals during those peak energy hours.
Like lunch being the main meal.
Potentially, yeah. or at least more substantial meals then. And then opting for lighter meals in the evening as your energy and likely your metabolism starts to wind down.
Interesting. Now, we do need to circle back to that number-based insights section mentioned. You said we'd touch on it.
Yes. And again, just to be absolutely crystal clear, numerology isn't science. It's not scientifically validated.
Right.
So any interpretations you might find based purely on birth dates or numbers, they're speculative. Interesting, maybe, to some, but not grounded in scientific evidence.
So if Soul Traveler is curious about that side of things.
The best advice would be to consult someone who actually specializes in numerology. Our focus here stays on what we can understand from circadian biology.
Oh, okay, got it. So let's shift to practical stuff. Based on this generalized picture, the potential morning leaning type, what kind of actionable guidance can we offer?
Well, the core advice really revolves around trying to structure your day to honor these natural energy flows as much as you realistically can.
So practically.
That could mean consciously scheduling those mentally demanding tasks, the heavy lifting, during that likely 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. peak window.
And saving the easier stuff for later.
Exactly. Maybe emails, routine admin, less demanding activities. Slot those into the periods when your energy might naturally be a bit lower, like the later afternoon.
That makes a lot of sense. Just being more mindful about when you do what. What about other general strategies for managing energy?
Oh, there's several key ones. Consistency is huge.
Yeah.
Trying to maintain regular sleep and wake times, even on weekends.
The dreaded weekend shift.
Right. It can really throw things off. So consistency helps anchor your rhythm. Regular physical activity is also generally great.
But maybe not right before bed.
Generally better to avoid intense exercise too close to bedtime, yeah. And then there's the usual suspects. Being mindful of caffeine, especially later in the day, alcohol too close to sleep,
Okay.
and, crucially, getting enough natural sunlight exposure, particularly in the morning. That's a powerful cue for your internal clock.
It's not just physical habits, though, is it? What about, like, stress and overall well-being?
You're absolutely right. Holistic well-being plays a massive role. Managing stress is key because chronic stress can really wreak havoc on circadian rhythms.
So things like meditation.
Yes, things like meditation, mindfulness, maybe yoga, spending time in nature, whatever works for you to help de-stress and relax, that can significantly support stable rhythms. And definitely a balanced diet rich in nutrients. It fuels your body and supports sustained energy, which ties back into everything else.
Okay. Now, thinking about bumps in the road,
Mm-hmm.
what typically throws these rhythms out of whack for people? What are common energy drains?
Yeah, several common culprits often emerge. Stress, as we just mentioned, is a big one.
Definitely feel that one.
Poor sleep hygiene is another major one. Things like, inconsistent bedtimes, using screens right before bed, an uncomfortable sleep environment.
Right, the blue light effect.
Exactly. Also, an unhealthy diet lacking proper nutrients and simply not getting enough regular physical activity.
Yeah.
Those can all disrupt energy and rhythms.
Okay, so those are the challenges, but what about the opportunities? How can we actively enhance or support our natural rhythms?
The good news is there's plenty we can do. Regular exercise, again, is a powerful tool. Mindful eating, just being more aware of how and when you eat. Establishing and really sticking to those consistent sleep schedules is probably one of the most impactful strategies.
Consistency seems key.
It really is. And, of course, finding effective personal ways to manage stress. It all works together.
The report also mentioned alignment techniques. What does that mean generally?
Those are basically practices that help you become more attuned to your body's signals and the environment.
Right.
Like simply paying closer attention to when you naturally feel tired or alert. That's a form of mindfulness, really. Meditating helps calm the nervous system, supporting healthy rhythms,
Okay.
and making a conscious effort to connect with nature, spending time outside, noticing daylight changes that can also foster a greater sense of alignment with natural cycles.
Right. Now, Soul Traveler, before we wrap up this deep dive, there's a really, really crucial point we need to stress about this kind of analysis.
Absolutely vital. Please remember, Soul Traveler, that everything we've discussed today is a generalized interpretation. It's based on the birth time and general chronobiology principles.
It's not a diagnosis.
Exactly. For a truly personalized, accurate understanding of your specific circadian rhythm, the gold standard is always to consult with a healthcare professional, or perhaps a chronobiologist.
Why them specifically?
Because they can do much more comprehensive assessments. They can consider your individual health history, lifestyle factors, maybe even use specific monitoring tools if needed.
Okay. And the report also hinted at ways Soul Traveler could gather more personal data themselves.
Yes, absolutely. Things like self-tracking apps or wearable devices, fitness trackers that monitor sleep and activity. These could be really valuable.
So.
They can help you, Soul Traveler, gather more detailed insights over time into your own unique energy patterns, your sleep quality, how different things like exercise or meals seem to affect you.
And that personal data could be useful later.
Definitely. It can provide a much richer picture and be really helpful context if you do decide to have that conversation with a healthcare professional down the line.
All right, so just to recap for you, Soul Traveler, we've explored how your 7:06 a.m. birth time suggests a potential leaning towards a morning lark or moderate early bird chronotype.
hmm And we looked at the generalized energy flow that might go with that likely peak between roughly 10 a.m. and 2 p.m. and the corresponding general guidelines for sleep and wake times.
And we've covered some practical general advice, thinking about scheduling tasks around energy, key management strategies like consistency and light exposure, and those alignment techniques.
Trying to work with your body's natural inclinations rather than constantly fighting against them.
Exactly. So here's a final thought, Soul Traveler, something to maybe mull over. For the next few days, try to be a bit more observant.
Yeah, actively notice your own energy.
Pay attention to when you naturally feel most alert, most focused, and also notice when you feel those energy dips.
See how those personal observations line up or maybe don't line up perfectly with the generalized insights we talked about today.
Consider it like step one, a starting point for tuning in and gaining a deeper, more personal understanding of your own unique internal rhythm.